What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Bob Mitchell. Now, Bob is a Canadian author and journalist who covered crime and sports for the Toronto Star for more than 35 years. Now, after leaving the newspaper in 2013, Bob turned his attention to writing UFO books. Since then, he has authored 3 UFO books to go along with his 4 crime books. His UFO books primarily deal with first-person accounts from people who believe they have encountered aliens and have been abducted. Bob Mitchell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be on a British show for a change. Most of the stuff I've been doing is in the United States, but let's give it a go. Got some interesting things I'm sure your audience will be interested in.
I'm sure they will. This is actually the 3rd attempt, isn't it, to get you on? Because
yes.
we tried previously, but it wasn't.
I think it goes back to last April,
I think it does, yeah. Now, touch wood, everything is working perfectly, so that's great. But actually, we have had you on in a funny way because we had Jason on a few weeks ago in regards to your co-authored book, which is Forbidden Knowledge. I can't think of the full title right now. It escapes me.
Revelations of a Multidimensional Time Travel.
That's the one. Yes, yes. Okay, so we're going to link that interview just at the bottom of this one as well. That's
Sure.
a fascinating book. But before we get into, looking, into anything like that, I want to know just a little bit about Bob in the sense of how you got into MUFON, because, I believe that you've written crime novels, but never did you ever think about getting into UFO research, and just let us know just how that happened for you, just
Sure.
briefly. Yeah.
Sure. I've always been interested in the phenomena, and so have my wife. Anytime there's any kind of show on TV, documentaries, etc., we're always right in front of the television and either taping it or watching it in live. So it's been something that has been with me for quite a while. But I spent the bulk of my all of my professional career as a journalist for Canada's largest newspaper, which is the Toronto Star. And I started in sports, left that after about 7 years, went to news, and then spent the majority of my career covering crime, and particularly murders and court cases. And then I got transferred back down to the headquarters to cover sports, where I ended up covering the Toronto Maple Leafs of the NHL and the Toronto Argos of the Canadian Football League. And around 2013, the commute was just becoming horrendous for me because we had moved out of Toronto and didn't realize how much that would a toll it would take, and especially during the wintertime. And sometimes my commute was about 5 hours total each day. So decided to take a buyout in 2013 and wanted to just do some freelancing. And one of the things that I thought I'd do is I'd find who was investigating UFOs in the Brantford area of southern Ontario where I live. And so I contacted MUFON. And I said, I need to talk to somebody that you have in my area. And they said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And they put me in touch with the Ontario director, who was Stu Bundy, and called him up. And he basically said, no, we don't have anybody, but, I'd be happy to talk to you about something. So I said, oh, why not? So I had lunch with him. And before I knew it, I sort of became the guy that I wanted to interview. I joined MUFON. I did their tests and became a field investigator. And for about a year and a half, I did that, and it was interesting. But I found it wasn't what I was really interested in. I really wanted to talk to somebody who had experiences, who had an encounter with a otherworldly being. And we decided to organize a small meeting in Brantford to see if there was any interest in the phenomena. And we rented a coffee shop, thought we'd get maybe 10 people. And lo and behold, we got about 75 people. They were lined up to get in the door. And afterwards, it was just an incredible sight, because people one by one were coming up to me and wanting to tell me their stories. And it was overwhelming. I just couldn't believe how many people had experiences, because I didn't realize at the time there were millions of people around the world who actually said they had encounters. I knew about Betty and Barney Hill. I knew about Travis Walton. In fact, I just met Travis Walton a couple of weeks ago at the Alien Cosmic Expo that I helped organize, and we got along great. He's a really down to earth guy. But other than that, I didn't know. So the strangest part about it was the people that were coming up to me were in their 50s and 60s. And they had all these experiences that they had kept hidden all their lives. And they hadn't told anybody. And for some reason that night, I was the guy they wanted to unburden themselves to. So, I couldn't talk to everybody, but some of the people that night that I talked to, I ended up writing about in my first book, Intrusion-Alien Encounters. And that book led to What If? Close Encounters of the Unusual Kind. altogether, I think there's about, in the two books, 15 people, all Canadians, um, and they all had different stories. There were some similarities, but basically each one of them had a unique experience that certainly I had never heard before, and they had never told before.
Yes, yes,
So,
and this
so
was
I just sort of became the go-to guy, and and since then, I still help out MUFON Canada organize some things, and I handle their Twitter account, but I'm not really involved with the MUFON International anymore. I've let my membership sort of lapse, and I'm not doing any field investigation because I wasn't really interested in lights in the sky anymore. I wanted to do the down to earth personal interviews, and that's what
well.
I've done. And believe me, I could probably write about another 5 books
I
just on that topic alone if I had the time.
I bet you could, and I was going to just try to say there as well that yeah, you cover the Canadian side of research, but
Yeah.
your perspective on this is constantly evolving right now. I know that from
Oh yes,
the
absolutely.
yeah, I know that from the book Forbidden Knowledge: Revelations of a Multidimensional Time Traveler. You're. Ooh, I don't know. Well, it's for me. Your understanding has gone a lot more into the spiritual side, but we'll discuss that in a bit as well. Now,
Sure.
you had your own encounter from my own research that I've done on you, or
Yeah.
a potential encounter.
Yeah, I'm still not sure what it was, and I have, well, I have been making arrangements to be regressed. It just hasn't happened yet because I want to find out myself whether it's um, just it's not what I think it might be, and but basically it was about, what is this? Is 2016 now, so I would say it was about 10 years ago. We were living in a town called Oakville, Ontario, which is just outside of Toronto, and we had, I think we had been there for a couple of years when this happened, and it was summertime, and we would sit out in the deck in the backyard all the time and look up at the sky, my wife and I, and we'd see things that were satellites, and we'd also see shooting stars, and then every once in a while we'd see something that seemed to go straight and then stop and then do another movement, which certainly isn't a satellite, but we figured it was a UFO, and we were quite, interested in that. But that was about, the gist of it. So at the time, I'm still working for the Star and have a normal day job, basically. And my wife is working as a medical technician for an assisted living home near our home, but she had the late shift, and she would come home around midnight. And this particular night, she came home, and we talked for a bit, and then I went to bed. And I'm a very light sleeper. Usually, a pin drop, you can wake up, and I think that comes from being a parent. You're always worried about your kids, and it just never goes away, even if the kids aren't in the home anymore. So I went to bed, and for some reason I was in a dead sleep, and I mean a dead sleep. And around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, my wife comes into the bedroom and shakes me and wakes me up and says, "You got to come out to the living room. You got to look up in the sky." And so I remember, getting out of bed and coming out into the living room, and I'm still half asleep, but I'm out in the living room, and now. After that, I don't remember quite much, but my wife says that she opened the blinds and she pointed up in the sky, and I looked up there, and she says what we saw was this bright light that seemed to almost be like a beam, and it shot right up through the clouds in an opening. The light didn't seem to go right to the ground, but it definitely went right through these clouds, and it's pitch black, so there really was a pretty good picture of this. I don't remember looking up or seeing that. She says I did. But next thing that happens is that there's a storm that suddenly engulfs everything, and it's like it just, the wind is rolling around very fast, and all of a sudden the garbage cans start, lying down the street, and I can hear the patio furniture out in the back rolling. So my wife goes out the front to get the garbage cans, and I remember that, and I walk out into the patio area of the backyard to get the patio furniture. And when I walk out, the first thing that I remember, and this I do recall this, is that it seemed to be broad daylight out there, but I didn't look up. It should have been pitch black, but it's broad daylight, and I remember grabbing all the furniture, and it was all over the place, and putting it back, but at the same time, I distinctly remember being as if I was in this wind tunnel, and it wasn't cold, it wasn't hot, but this wind was swirling all around me. It was like I felt like Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz. It was just like really coming around me. But at some point, I guess the wind stopped because I managed to get the furniture all back in place. My wife says that she came into the backyard from the driveway and asked me if I needed any help, and I remember saying, no, I don't. And then I turned around and walked into the house again. And my wife says we sat down on the couch and talked about the strange light in the sky and the wind. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. The next thing that I remember is waking up the next morning, and my first thought was, boy, that was a hell of a dream last night. It was so real, but it just made no sense to me, so I thought, it had to be a dream. And my wife was sleeping, so I went to work, and then, but when I got home that night, there was a neighbor outside, and I went up to a neighbor and I said, that was some storm we had last night, and he didn't know what I was talking about. I said, oh, the garbage cans were flying everywhere around. The wind was like a hurricane force, and he said he must have slept through it. He didn't notice anything. And I noticed that his property seemed to be okay, so there was nothing that looked like anything had been thrown down the street from his property or anybody else around. And when I went in, I said to my wife, I said, did we get out of bed last night in the middle of the night and got all these furniture and was blowing around? And she says, oh yeah, it was quite a big storm. What do you mean you don't remember? And I said, well, I remember pieces of it. And then she told me about the light, and I said, I didn't remember that either. And she says, oh, you're getting old. And so the strange thing was that I don't think we ever talked about it again. It was something that happened, and it just left me until I started writing these books. And one day, my wife and I are sitting on the couch, I guess, and we're talking about one of the interviews I did, and our thoughts went back to that night. And for the very first time, she tells me that when she came out in the backyard, I was engulfed in a bluish-white light. And she had never told me that before, and she doesn't know why she never told me that before. But in my research, with interviewing a lot of people, one of the common denominators of their abductions and encounters happens when they're surrounded in a bluish-white light. So that gave me some reason now to think that something else happened. Of course, my wife says, no, you didn't go anywhere. You're still in bed the whole time. And I know because I was up. And so I want to find out what happened. But the fact that I was still in bed and she didn't see me leave isn't a problem for me because, as you said, my thoughts about abduction have changed over the last year. And it fits in quite well with what one of my theories is right now. But I'm hoping to get a regression done sometime this summer and to find out for sure what happened.
Absolutely. So what do you think that your theory is then for the abduction? What's your thoughts now on that, why that happened to you?
Well, I don't know why it happened to me, but, and I really have absolutely no memory whatsoever of being anywhere. So I want to make that clear. But I guess that's not unusual because some people never have any recollections until they actually get under, including Betty and Barney Hill. I mean, there was a loss of time, but they didn't know what that loss of time was until they took regression. But from writing, essentially from writing What If Close Encounters of the Unusual Kind, and the very first person in the book that I interview, to the evolution of writing, co-writing with Jason Quitt on Forbidden Knowledge, Revelations of a Multidimensional Time Traveler, it has occurred to me that not all abductions are taking place in the physical reality of a third dimensional world which we live in. To me, it almost makes more sense now that whoever is doing the abductions is actually abducting your consciousness. And that would explain how so many people say that they feel themselves being lifted off their bed, straight through the ceiling of their house, and into a spaceship or into some underground base or somewhere where they're examined. My feeling is that they're not physically there. It's their consciousness that's there, and the brain and the consciousness really contains all our emotions and feelings. And if something is hurting us in that realm, we think it's real, but we haven't gone anywhere, because that would explain why so many spouses say their spouse never went anywhere. They're always still in bed with them the whole time, and kids have come into the room and mommy and daddy are still there. And the same thing with parents of kids who say they've had encounter. They go in their rooms and they haven't left anywhere, because they haven't. It's their consciousness that has left, because it's pretty hard for us to fly up in the air and go through a ceiling unless we're in an out-of-body experience like Jason has done numerous times. That's not to say that there aren't physical abductions. Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, to name two, were definitely physical abductions.
But your research is now looking at this whole idea of a consciousness abduction, and not even that really. Maybe it's even as though it's sort of like a communication with your consciousness, where they're able to tap into a different frequency that we're not unaware of, that greater part of you. And even talking like we're talking right now, it goes outside the realms of normal, normal UFO understanding or research. But as I said at the beginning of this interview, it is going a lot more towards this. You must have noticed a shift in some of the researchers.
A lot of research now are talking about consciousness far more than ever. It's become the in thing to do. One of the people that I interviewed for my What If book, her name is Josie, and she told me something very interesting, and I'm not even sure if it's in the book, because I wrote a book last year, and I've talked to her many times since then. But
okay.
She describes a horrific series of events where almost every night she is abducted out of her bed, taken into some lab somewhere where horrible things are done to her. Things are stuffed down her throat, and other places she has memories of even an alien hand going right through her body, and she's screaming in pain. But I asked her one time, I said, when you were on that table, you saw everything around you, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, did you ever notice your body? And she had to think about that for a minute, and then she says, I never did. I could see everything, but I felt I was there, but I didn't see my legs or my hands or anything. It was just, you're looking at it with a 360-degree consciousness that people say happens when they go into an out-of-body experience. So that moment there was sort of an aha moment for me, because I started asking other people, and remarkably, the majority of them had the same feeling, that they didn't remember seeing their body there. So what's going on? The consciousness somehow is being tapped into.
That's a good word.
But they all have this feeling of being levitated. So and that's out of body experience right there. So
Yeah, yeah.
and of course, I also believe now, from the book I did with Jason, that I think most of the entities, I don't even want to call them extraterrestrials anymore, because I'm not sure that's the right term, but um, there are the physical extraterrestrials, such as the Greys, reptilians, Palladians, these type of things that people are familiar with. But I think there's probably hundreds of more species that live in a dimensional world, and they have far more capabilities than the physical ones, and they're the ones that we're in contact with, and it's not always bad contact. Um, to the person that's getting abducted, it feels like a horrific event that's happening, because it's so out of their own rational thinking. But the strangest thing is, most of the people I've talked to who've had multiple experience will tell you that by the end of the experiences that they have over the years, they start feeling an affinity with the creatures, and there's almost like a bond. Now, some people might call it the Stockholm syndrome. I don't know, but it's as if that they miss the experiences when they stop, and that seems like a completely strange thing. But one of the other theories I think of, and Jason would agree to this, is that reincarnation is definitely what happens to us, and that we can come back in any kind of body, be it a human being or an extraterrestrial. So in some ways, the people that are getting abducted perhaps are actually being abducted by their relatives, because so many of them have told me too that when they ask, and and they're asking telepathically too, because there's never any vocal communication between these things. They ask them, why, and almost always the answer they get is that you've agreed to this. And again, the rational mind would say, well, why would I agree to being abducted and experimented on? Maybe in the other life they've signed some agreement and said, we're going to be watching you, and at some point we're going to take you back to see how you're doing in this body. I don't know. I think anything is plausible these days, because there's so many things going on.
Very, very interesting the direction you've gone in. I mean, you go back to writing the first. Well, you just go back to writing Intrusion. You would have never have had this understanding, or
No.
The conversation wouldn't have taken place. So there's been a massive shift in you to do this, and
Yeah.
We're talking
And
about. Sure.
not everybody back to talk to people. Yeah, I said I've gone back to talk to some of the people from Intrusion who I've become very friends with. They just don't want to have anything to do with my theory on the consciousness. They are absolutely sure and positive it was a physical experience.
Okay. Well, can I just
sure.
say something? That okay, and that's a very valid point. That is, and as you have said, there is the physical abductions and there is the consciousness abductions, if that's what we're going to call it. It seems like, though, doesn't it, that there's a whole myriad of species that are interacting, with the human race. There's the multidimensional and there's the sort of physical beings. Yet they must they must know of each other, though. They must be aware of each other.
Oh, I think they are, and the thing is that the dimensional beings absolutely would know of each other, because time doesn't really exist in the interdimensional. And so they probably cross paths all the time, and they're probably connected somehow consciously too. It's only in a third dimensional world that there's an up and down and a sideways, and when you knock on a table, it's physical. In other worlds, Jason's into crystals, right? So crystals are a healing power, and in this world, they look like rocks. But if you go into multi-dimensions, and I don't know how far you have to go up to, but at some point, these crystals are living, breathing beings. It's just in this world, they're not. They're actually moving, but we can't see it. because our brain doesn't allow us to do that. So,
and as you've said as well, this whole idea of this past life or future life connection as well, where they're coming here because there's a lineage with the people that they're abducting.
I'll give you an example of the story that really started the change in me. And this was before I even met Jason. But this is where I thought that, wow, there is something that I never even thought of before. And it's the first story that's in my book, What If? It involves a man named Satya Anand. And he was born in Montreal, lived all his life growing up there, and was very much into meditation, the yoga, spiritual world. Then he met a family that had a connection to a Tibetan monk, I guess you would call it, or a Tibetan guru, and he wanted more information about what life is, because he said when he was in school he didn't buy the theory that the teachers were spilling out that the reason people are black near the equator is that the sun shines harder there and their skins have to turn, and that's why North Americans are generally white, because the sun's not brighter. Like, he thought that was a stupid thing to say, but he remembers his teacher telling him that, so he thought that even as a kid that didn't make any sense. So he goes over to Tibet, and actually he spends about off and on over the next 25 years in Tibet, learning everything he can from one of the high enlightened masters. And at one point he actually lives there for 9 straight years. So he knows everything. He very adept at out-of-body experiences, has had the usual out-of-body experiences, but nothing really related to aliens. In fact, he doesn't know much about aliens whatsoever. When he told me the story, he says he's not even sure if he even knew anything about the Greys, although he thinks he probably did, because the Greys are the most popular alien entity out there. So one day he's with some friends, and now he's living in Toronto, and he comes back to his condo, and the 2 friends go out on the balcony, and he says, I'm just going to go lie down for a second to recharge my batteries with a meditation. So he's lying in bed, and the next thing he knows, his body is being shot out of his consciousness is being shot out of his body like a cannon, and it's hurtling through outer space. And for people who have had similar experiences, the experience of hurtling through outer space is quite common. It seems ridiculous, but they all have the same thought in it. And he's hurtling. He sees the Earth getting smaller, and all the planets are going by. And then he absolutely notices that he's not doing this in a conscious state. He looks down and he sees he's wearing the same Docker pants that he had when he was lying on bed. He's got arms. His arms are there. He's got the same shirt on. He touches his face. He can feel his face. Yet he can breathe. And he's just flying, through outer space. And he sees all the planets and then all the stars. And then at some point, he leaves our solar system, and he expects to see more stars. And instead, it's pitch blackness. And he stops. And he's actually floating in space. There's nothing around him. He's looking at himself. He can't figure out, what's going on. And then suddenly he feels somebody or something is staring at him. And he described it to me as the same feeling you get if you in a car at a stoplight and you get the sense that the person in the next car is looking at you, and you quickly look over and they quickly pretend they're not looking at you. That's how he described it, only this was many more times as it was piercing him. And in the distance, he suddenly sees something coming towards him. And it's coming towards him very, very fast. And suddenly, right in front of his, within arm's length basically, is this gigantic creature that he can only describe as an insectoid. Its head is at least 8 feet tall, so the body has got to be 20, 30 feet. These long arms, they look like mechanical arms, are all by its side, and before he can have a thought of, oh my God, this is a horrific sight, and he's gonna scream, an overwhelming feeling of love engulfs him. He says it's a love that you never felt in your life, maybe only for your parents. It's so overwhelming that he can't even explain it, but it's everywhere around him. And there's a telepathic communication that begins. And essentially what happens is that he looks at the creature and the creature looks at him, and he has this overwhelming feeling that he knows this creature. It's a female, he knows that. And it's not only a sense that he knows this creature, but there's a bond there of some kind. So telepathically, they begin to communicate, and Sancha asks the creature, do I know you? And the creature says yes, and he says, where? And the creature says, many, many lives. And he says, as my body, and he points to his own body, and the creature says no, as her body. And so that is overwhelming to him, that he knew this creature when he was one of them. And he says, well, were we together? And she says yes. So now he's getting this feeling that there's more of it's not just a familiar thing, that they might have been partners of some kind in some other previous life. And he says, will we be together again? And the creature says yes. And he says, in my body or your body? And the creature says, in her body again. And at that moment, he finds himself being shoved back down through the universe, and he wakes up in bed. And here's a guy that has always believed in reincarnation, but he always thought that reincarnation took place on Earth, that you die, you can come back in this form, or you come back in a plant form or an animal form or some other human Earth entity or animal entity. But this was the first time that it ever occurred to him that reincarnation took place in the entire universe, and that you could come back as anything.
Yeah.
And this familiarity and the love of this creature shows that there is no hatred involved in this creature, which ends up being a mantis. He didn't even know what it was until he actually looked it up one day. And the interesting thing about that is, in my first book, Intrusion, 2 of the women had encounters with mantis, and unlike every other encounter they've had, they had the same overwhelming love and affection and connection to these creatures. So if Santa is right, then everybody who has this experience with a mantis being may have been that being before. Because, as I said, if an 8-foot tall mantis being suddenly appeared right now in front of me, I think I'd be, freaked out of my mind. But according to everybody else, I wouldn't be. I'd feel nothing but love.
Nothing but love. Nothing but love. Yeah. Now, isn't that there? You go again, right? This. Okay, so in the physical form, as far as we understand, it's in the physical form, and nothing but love, and that past life connection. Now, it's almost like, isn't it, that their understanding of consciousness and their ability to tune into it is a lot more less veiled than ours is, in the sense that they remember who they truly are, that they're a spiritual, their spiritual essence, where we don't. It's as though that when the soul incarnates into the human body, it's the veil seems to be quite high. Now, isn't this so interesting what you're saying here as well? Now, as you're talking, what I'm thinking is, that maybe they're that loving and they're that aware of their who they are. They're very spiritually evolved. That's the word I'm trying to put together. And in that sense,
they are.
In that sense, is that the main overarching reason that they are not coming forward to say, "Hey guys, here we are. This is our technology, and this is how long we've been around for. This is your history, or here's some understanding of what we have of your history." Would we look at them as gods if they did that? So what they do is they're that spiritually evolved that they won't do that to us. It's almost like we've got to reach a level for them to come forward to say they're here.
Yeah. I mean, this is just the one species, the mantids. I don't think all species are like that, but certainly people that have had mantis experiences, I would say there is a connection there. And yes, if any species, if the mantid suddenly appeared in a physical form, and I think they're one of the few species that can. Certainly, just like our great ancestors in ancient Egypt and Sumeria, when the Anunnaki came down, they thought they were gods. So I don't know what we'd think now in the modern age of man if they came here. I'm not sure that we would have the same feeling as being gods in a sense, but certainly. I haven't really found any evidence, you're looking back at the ancient stories of anybody ever encountering a mantis back then. Seems to be a relative new phenomena over the last 10 years, maybe. So I'm not even sure what to make of that, except that they're now willing to come forward to some people.
Right.
And it seems to be you have to have this out-of-body consciousness experience. And it is in the conscious world because otherwise more people, I think, would have had it in just their everyday abduction experience.
It's interesting. I was listening to an interview that Dr. Robert Wise gave a few years ago. He's a past life regressionist, quite famous, I think, actually. Hope I've got the name right there. Mm-hmm. I actually interviewed someone who did the training for their hip regression work under Dr. Wise. And he was saying that actually, this was Dr. Wise, was saying that he had a lot of patients that regress to previous lives in different dimensions and different worlds, and I wonder if there's a bridge between these people's work and what you're discovering as well. There seems to be some commonality there.
Well, there seems to be a different kind of connection with the mantis and human beings. It seems to be completely different than any other alien species. So I'm not sure on the pecking order what level the mantis are. But the other thing that people have said is that in some of their abduction experiences involving the Greys, and even other entities, they swear that in the background they see an insectoid creature sort of overseeing everything. Now that could mean one of two things: that either what's being done to them is not meant to harm them, and the presence of a mantid there is to show that we're not going to hurt you. We love you. You're part of us in other lives. Or this is a tremendous con game that the mantis are playing, that making everybody feel they're nothing but love, but in the other sense they're the overlords. I hope it's not that case, but
and let's also just look at the mental state of the people that have gone through this as well. These people. A lot of them you've met, and these are quite well-to-do people. They don't need the fame. Then they're not going to come forward. They've come forward to someone like yourself because you've met them in the right circumstances. But
nobody really, they didn't tell their story to anybody. They just wanted to. And after they told the story to me, every single one of them, I can say without exception, changed in personality. They felt relieved. They felt this tremendous burden that had been lifted off their shoulders. they almost felt reborn. And now they're willing to talk about it. Several of them have now, come to meetings and got up on the stage and told their stories. They feel more comfortable. And one of the most incredible women that I met, and she's an intrusion. Her name is Marianne Anderson, and she's completely deaf. And that posed a problem for me at first because she could contact me via email, and I really couldn't make out much of what she was saying even on the email because her writing is kind of broken. I did end up meeting her at one of our meetings and really pleaded with me to come to her house, and she was going to have an interpreter there so she could tell me her story. And I did. And over a course of many weekends, she basically told me about these beings that were coming through her walls, taking her places, showing her future events. But she was very scared and horrified still, and she wanted me to make them stop. And I told her, well, I don't have the ability to do that. But the strangest thing happened. After a while, I could understand her when she was talking to me without being interpreted. Her English seemed to have suddenly, or her pronunciation seemed to have suddenly cleared. And so I could have a conversation with her and I could understand her without anybody interpreting. She came over to our house and met my wife for the first time, and they hit it off tremendously. And in fact, my wife started using her hands. She started talking in her hands, and every time I asked a question, Marianne asked me to get my wife to ask it through her. Now, my wife knows nothing about sign language, but for some reason, what she was doing with her hands connected to Marianne, and it was quite funny to look at it because she was explaining what Marianne was saying. I have no idea how that happened. My wife doesn't know how that happened. But today, Marianne will stand up in front of crowds and talk and has no fear of it. Before, she was a shy introvert, and I can only imagine when you live your life in silence like she has, imagine trying to explain to anybody growing up that you've had these incredible encounters with alien beings. I'm not even sure there's a sign language for ETs or anything like that, but she just has become a completely different person. And whether it has something to do with me, I'd like to think, well, I helped her along that way. But it's an amazing transformation. And everybody seemed to have it.
Bob, I'd like to think that you've helped a lot of people. There's probably been a lot of people that's read your books, because they're really good books as well,
Yeah.
right? That, you'll never know what help you gave them because they've never come forward. So, but
Oh yeah,
I bet that's
it's a tremendous feeling to be able to help somebody. I've had Joanne Eady, who's the organizer of the Alien Cosmic Expo that we have here. She introduced me to Jason, and she just says that all these people, it's divine intervention, like that I was meant to meet these people. I was meant to meet Jason, and we're meant to do things, and it's all unfolding.
Yeah.
And again, 3 or 4 years ago, not the slight, I had no idea this was ever going to happen.
Well, let me ask you something else as well. When you, I don't know if you ever think like this. I do. This is the way I think sometimes. When I look at a universe that's infinitive, right? That's the potential. But that's what they say, the scientists, that there's a potential that this universe is infinitive. Now, I don't know about you. I can't get that round my head, right? And even if it wasn't, right? Even if it wasn't, and it stopped somewhere, what's beyond where it stops? Yeah. So what the point I'm trying to make here is, with that, well, not even having no understanding of infinitiveness, right? That it just seems to me that how can these things not be impossible, in a sense that there's realities upon realities out there that are beyond our current understanding.
Oh, absolutely. And you say, does the universe stop? I mean, wouldn't it be funny if you were able to set off from England today and travel as far as you could, and the next thing you know, you're back in England again. That it's all one circle.
It's well, yeah, yes, yeah. What if when we talk about when we go to heaven, when we pass on, or home as some people call it, what about if it's already in this space that we're already exist in, this universe? What if this infiniteness is part of the everything when we cross over? That it's not up there, down there.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of what Jason talks about in our book Forbidden Knowledge, that this is just one life. We live multiple lives all at the same time, and that when we leave this life, we go into our consciousness doesn't die. It's in another dimension, and then when we come back, we can come back as anything, and that heaven really is where the consciousness is waiting till it goes back into another body. So, and you can choose to come back in any timeline too. I've always thought, even with the new book that's coming out and it deals with time travel, I don't think I've changed my feeling on this. Is that what if we do get to choose what timeline we come back in? What if we're living in the past right now, all of us, in this timeline? That the future may be our future, but to other people it's their present. So if we all live in multiple timelines at the same time, something to get your head around.
Well, what if, go into that respect, what if you've chosen to relive this same life over again and again? Just this same life, we've all lived it again and again because we chose to come back, because we never got this life the way we wanted it to. And that's the reason we have deja vu.
I was going to say that, yeah. I mean, I think anything is possible. And I really think that there's a segment of the population that is starting to believe that. Most of the population refuses to even consider that their every daily life is just what it really is. Their every daily life. That's the reality, and there's nothing else different. But I think there's more and more evidence that there is something different.
Okay, well, that's interesting what you're saying there. You're saying about people's struggle day to day. Just go back to the abductions as well. Now, it's almost like that when they if there is a soul lineage connection with the people that are being abducted and the abductor, as in, it's almost like that they to evolve their future self, they have to evolve their past, as in correct some of the mistakes of the past, which will correct their future and evolve them quicker. So do you know what I mean? So a lot of these abductions are trying to help. It's incredible. It really is. And do you find that with your latest book with Jason, which is coming up on the screen now as well, they've been coming up quite a bit actually, but do you find that with Jason and yourself that you're bringing there's information that's coming through with Jason now, connected with the ET phenomena still, that's maybe able to help us in our present day, in our present moment, as in spiritual teaching information that's able to come through and evolve the way that we think now, so that maybe we can come from a better space. Maybe we can be more loving as these abductees are. Maybe we can be kinder. Maybe it is better to be of service. Maybe there's values that can come from it. Have you thought of that?
I guess inadvertently I've had. It's not something that it pops into my mind, but I do know that an incredible number of people, wherever we have been selling the books at shows and conferences, people just come up to Jason and thank him profusely for sharing his story. And a lot of them, it has validated some of the things that they've experienced in their life. That's one of the interesting things about when you write UFO books, and while the Forbidden Knowledge isn't technically a UFO book, I'm not even sure what you would call it, but the stories that I've put in books that people can read validates the readers who have had the same experience, that suddenly they realize, I'm not nuts, I'm not going crazy, this happened to me, oh my gosh, it happened to this woman too. So
Well,
the
yes.
more people that read the books, they now feel that they're normal. And because of that, there a lot of more people are coming out to talk about it.
Well, let me just say something. I would say there's what I agree with everything you're saying there as well, Bob. And I think what we should say as well is there's such a great population out there in the world that have been through abductions and have never come forward because it's something they don't
Absolutely.
want to talk about. But it's happening on a massive scale.
Yeah, and you know, there can't be a million people out there completely nuts, and so
No, no, there's not.
I just I like to take people at face value what they tell me, because why would they tell me these things? Most of them use their real names. The ones that didn't had a very good reason for not, and the reasons usually are they don't want their boss to find out because they feel they'd be treated differently. They or their friends to find out because, again, they never told their friends. And other ones might have spouses or sons in very high political organizations that would look down on him if
Yes.
they said their mother or their. But there's no doubt that the more books like this that come out, the more people feel comfortable.
Do you
And the validation.
Thank you. Do you feel that, or have you considered this, that in the spiritual community, those that are really like big into spirituality only would never cross paths with this type of work because they would feel that it would degrade their work, which I find such a pity that happens. But that's what I found.
Well, it depends, because essentially, when people talk about God, what they're really talking about is the source of all creation. And even the aliens believe in the source of all creation. So the problem would be that if you were to try to convince somebody who was devoutly religious here to say that your God is the same God that the Greys pray to, they would be completely, angry with you. But the fact is that there is a source above everything, and the source and we're all connected in the universe to this one source, be it an alien, be it a human, being it a plant. So spiritually, I think a lot of people are starting to feel that. Whether or not they want to admit it, I don't know. It's just like, when we had this Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford a couple of weeks ago, where we had the first Canadian national inquiry into UFOs and extraterrestrials. I contacted at least 500 mainstream journalists in Canada, and also many in the States, including CNN, Fox, ABC, CBS, etc., and said, "Listen, come up to Canada. We'll get you here. Be on our panel to question some of the best knowledgeable people in the world, and you can ask any question you want." I got almost zilch replies. Not even people saying, "Well, thank you for the invite, but I'm not available." Just not even a reply, which was not surprising to me. But I had hoped that by now this would be something that people would want to cover.
No.
And they didn't. The mainstream just did not even want to acknowledge that it was happening. Paul Hellyer was there, and the mainstream considers him a joke right now. But I don't know what it's going to take to get, mainstream papers to assign somebody to do an investigation into UFOs.
Well,
spend 6 months.
Maybe as science progresses, then there'll be newer discoveries of other realities, and as we progress consciously, when we're ready for that kind of technology, then it's, it'll change like that. I think though, Bob, if you want to see the change, be the change, and that's what you do. That's what you do.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, and I basically own what I'm doing. I don't make apologies for what I'm doing, although I've never had anybody really attack me for anything, which is surprising. But it's for some reason people have chosen me, and the book I co-wrote with Jason has struck a nerve that it's been among Amazon's top selling UFO books or spiritual books ever since it came out in March 23rd. We're just actually right now negotiating to have the book translated into Chinese in Taiwan and Hong Kong. So that'll open up another market for us.
Oh yeah.
But everybody's buying it, and it's. I mean, Jason knew it would be that successful. I had some doubts because I wasn't sure a lot of people, were even into the stuff that Jason was talking about. Much to my surprise, there are many, many people out there, far more than I ever thought of. And we have a new book that is coming out September 30th. It's called Disclosed, The Chronicles of John Titor II. I don't know if people in England know anything about John Titor or not, but this is not the same person that suddenly appeared in 2000 with tremendous predictions that never came true, who claimed he was from the future. This is a completely different John Titor, and we actually go into the book about why the first one, or why he was given the same name. But the essential thing I can tell you is that we call it disclosed because as mind-boggling forbidden knowledge was, we say prepare to have your mind blown with this one, because we talk about what really is going on with the UFO phenomenon in the world, and what is about to happen and what has happened, and how John Titor changed the timeline. Hopefully for the better, but and we talk about extraterrestrials. People are going to be extremely shocked, surprised, alarmed. Other people are going to be saying, "I knew that was the case. I absolutely knew it." We've already we're getting emails from people wanting to buy the book, and it's not available yet, and it's not even for sale yet, because it actually hasn't. I haven't finished writing it yet, but it will be available on September 30th, one way or another, and it's going to be a book that will change people's outlook on the world they live in.
Okay. Well,
and it's going to anger some people. It's going to anger some people too.
That's good. No, that's good. I'm always up for new ways of looking at things and new understanding. So that's just absolutely fantastic that you're doing that. I thought there might be another book underway, especially with the direction that you guys have gone in, and yourself as well.
Well, let me just say that it's John Titor II is a real whistleblower of the ultimate kind, and for many years he worked in a very, very, very ultra top secret unit of the United States Air Force based at Area 51, and he handled, and people are not going to believe this, but I think when you read this book you'll come away with a different understanding, that he handled the time travel division, and we've had the capability of doing that since the late 1980s.
And where did that technology come from?
The aliens came from the Greys, and the Greys are not the sinister beings that people think they are. They are actually the biggest ally of the United States.
Interesting, isn't it? Oh my God, I can't wait to get you back on for that. I really, really can't. So
Yeah, I know it's going to be a mind. As I say, prepare to be mind blown.
yeah, absolutely.
It's we've been doing this book now for about 5 months, interviews, and all the interviews are done. I just got one more chapter to write.
Okay, now obviously we're at the top of the hour here as well. I really wanted to touch on as well the Canadian version of Roswell, because that was in one of your books as well. But we've kind of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we've kind of gone.
And it's a minor story that nobody really knows about, and there's not much information out in my book.
Okay, so yeah, it's all in the book. Yeah. Which book is that in, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
It's Incident at Pleasant Ridge, a Canadian UFO mystery.
Right. Okay. Yeah. We'll put that on this.
I wouldn't call it Canada's Roswell, because
right.
there's no capture of an alien being or anything like that. But there is a craft that comes, disappears, does mind control, U.S. Army's involved, things go missing, soil samples go missing, and the Canadian government stonewalls everybody who ever wants to talk about it. So.
All right, and well, actually, just before you go as well, what would you say is an important message to the audience as well that you could give?
It's a message that I try to put out every day, is that the world you live in isn't the world you really think it is.
No, so true. Absolutely. Well, all I'd like to say is, Bob Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us today, and I can't wait to get you back on for your new book. Thank you.
Okay. My pleasure, Kevin.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.com, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.